Looks like Westeros will have a few more winters. I'm Joe Starr. This is Screen Junkies News. Hope you're ready to fight over the Iron Throne just a little bit more. HBO announced today that they are working with 4 different writers to develop 4 different possible Game of Thrones spin-offs for when their current long-running series comes to its inevitably bloody conclusion next year. 8 seasons, y'all. I just want Arya to get through it. That's all that's on my wish list. The show's current showrunners, Dan Weiss and David Benioff, will still serve as EPs on any of the projects that move forward, as will Mr. George R. R. Martin himself. But what are these projects? We don't know, but we've got plenty of good ideas. Here to fight with me over the throne is our own Mary Risk. Hey, Mary.
Hello, how are you doing, Joe?
I'm good. I am excited about this because, you know, on one hand, what I love about Game of Thrones is that it'll end, you know, beginning, middle, strong end before it wears out its welcome. But then the downside of that is then we're out of Game of Thrones.
We're out of Game of Thrones. And you know, everything is getting rebooted. Everything is getting a sequel made. It was kind of nice that Game of Thrones didn't have one, except for that I want the Game of Thrones more than I care about it not having any other products.
Just give me more stuff.
Just like, give me more Thrones.
Yeah, and there's a lot to pull from, you know, source material that he's written, and so where are these going to take place? Are they going to be prequels, sequels?
Spinoffs? Honestly, HBO hasn't specifically said. Right now, they're sort of hearing all the different ideas. So they've got 4 different writers they've lined up, and each of those writers is sort of coming back with a script, an idea, a pitch for a spinoff, sequel, prequel series. I think there's a good chance that we'll have a couple of different options from them, and HBO has said that they're willing to run with whichever of the ideas they like, potentially even more than one. So I think it could really fit anywhere. You know, George R. R. Martin has built such a vast universe with Westeros. There's a lot of history, and I think there's a lot that can be done in the past, but I'm also excited to see where people would take it in the future. Yeah,
I hadn't even thought about that, honestly. That's one trope I always love, where I'm like, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is neat, but what does it look like 500 years from then? So I love that idea. Let's talk about these writers a little bit, because this is like a really cool stable of writers. What can you tell me?
It's a good group. So I'm really excited about it. You've got 4 different people who have some very different pasts as far as what they've done screenwriting wise and production wise as well. You've got some producing talent in there. So Max Borenstein is the first one. He wrote Kong Skull Island and has done some like Godzilla stuff. For me, he's got a lot of history with monsters movies. I would love to see him do something with the dragons. It would be so cool.
Yeah,
he's done a lot with that before. He understands how to work CGI. He understands how to do things scale, like all these different you know, techniques that I think would be really useful in doing something with the dragons and the history of the dragons, and maybe even the history of the Targaryens. That could be really cool. So I could see him going that direction. Brian Hedlund, who, I'm so sorry if I said your name wrong, Brian. He's done a lot of really cool stuff too, and a lot of his pieces are really character driven. He did 42, which is the Jackie Robinson biopic, which I personally love.
A super underrated movie. If you haven't watched it, it's a very weird Alan Tudyk role, and you will love it. And
he also did Legend, of course, which is just, you know, fabulous.
Yes.
But so I think with him, you get a lot of character driven stuff. You could see a really cool spinoff about a character we've already met. I'm not sure who that would be, because so many of them are super dead.
100% Hot Pie.
Maybe Lady Stoneheart?
That would be nice. Yeah, a little Stoneheart.
We'll give you your Hot
Stoneheart
Pie.
Close second to Hot Pie.
Yeah, maybe just like a ghost show. I don't know.
Yeah, just
cool.
all ghosts.
All ghosts.
A ghost hunter show.
And then there are 2 women in there, which it's really exciting. You know, as a lady, I'm pumped about that. So Jane Goldman is one. She's great. She's done a lot of really cool stuff. She did a lot of production work in addition to screenwriting. She's done some of the X-Men movies, and then most recently she did The Kingsman, the new one that's coming out.
Okay, right on.
She was a producer on the first one, and she wrote the second one. And then she has a lot of story credits on stuff too. So I think she's a big idea person who's going to come in with some really unique and different stuff.
Yeah.
And then Carly Rae is the last one. She was a writer on Mad Men. She also did The Leftovers, Bastard Executioner, a couple of different things. Again, though, I think she's really got a penchant for drama and for telling long, drawn-out epic stories, which I think, you know, there's a lot of similarities between
I feel like that's
Mad
a good
Men
fit.
and Game of Thrones. Yeah, exactly. It's a great fit. And Jane and Carly are both going to be working one-on-one with George R. R. Martin, which suggests to me that they may be doing stories that we don't know.
Yeah, I really like that, sort of the pairing you talked about, Ray sort of being a larger sort of big picture person. And I love the idea of someone sort of tossing those past Martin and sort of having him help them like pare that down. So that's actually really, really cool that he's specifically working on them. So do you think that Could we even say that like maybe those are the two sort of worth watching, since it seems like those are the two that George R. R. Martin's thrown his hat in the ring with?
To me, yes. I think they are the two worth watching, but not because of talent or specifically working with George R. R. Martin. I just think that him working with them means that we're more likely to get something completely original. A story that we're not saying, oh yeah, I remember when this scene happened and such, Song of Ice and Fire, and now we're going to see a whole show about the backlash of this scene or what happened to lead up to this scene, you know? I think that if you're not, the two writers that aren't working with George R. R. Martin are probably relying more on canon, more on further telling stories we've already heard. And with me, these two women that are working with George R. R. Martin, maybe they've pulled something from his notes. Maybe it's a headcanon that he's never published yet. There could be things that they're working on that are just more unique and more new, and as a fan I find that really exciting.
That's really cool. How awesome is it to just get to go sit in the George vault, which I guess is just a desk like full of spiral notebooks. Like that's got to be fun to just sit on the floor and like flip through.
And none of the notebooks are finished.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Leaves them half empty.
I'll get that one done later. I got more fisherman hats to shop for. So let's speculate a little bit. So hot pie aside, because I think I have my finger on the pulse of the fandom, and we know that we really just want more hot pie. But let's take them out of the equation. What stories do you think they're looking into, or what do you want them to be looking into?
I think something that they would definitely be considering would be the Andals, the First Men, the Children of the Forest, sort of that thousands of years ago timeline that we've heard a lot about and seen just a little bit of. I think there's a lot of story to be told there, and I think there are a lot of characters that we could explore there. So I think that's kind of an obvious one. I would say the other big obvious one is going back and doing like young Ned Stark.
Yeah, that would be, and we've had a couple of flashbacks, you know, in the series
the tower
of that.
and all of that stuff, and there's a really cool story there, and that war with Robert, I could see them going back and showing us that. My only issue with that is a lot of what I think has been so exciting about Game of Thrones is that this series has been unpredictable, and specifically, obviously, if you've read the books, then not so much, but like the books themselves were even written in a way that it was hard to know exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that if you go back in time and do something that close to the current storyline that we know so much about, it's like we know who wins that war.
Yeah, we definitely have to find a smaller story within that we could sort of invest in. That's a prequel danger, you know. Even in the Hobbit series, you know, they put Legolas in a will he get out of this alive sort of fight with a boss, and it's like I know he does.
But
so
that's
exactly. Definitely something you sort of have to be careful for and keep an eye on.
House Targaryen is another one. I feel like we have physically seen the least of the past of House Targaryen. I feel like we hear a lot about it. I feel like, you know, Daenerys is a great link to it, but it would be cool to see her interact. Well, I mean, obviously not her, but see her family that we've heard about since then, like actually interacting with each other, and like up through even the birth of Daenerys. Like, I want to see the storm she was born in. Yeah,
the rise and decline, of the
Targaryens could be super interesting. Sequels, it's going to be harder. The only sequel that like really came to mind for me is I'd be interested in seeing Bran in like 40 years when he's old and like in the tree and is like three-eyed raven.
Full on three-eyed raven, sure.
Yeah, and I feel like there could be a really interesting story there, especially if at that point he's the last surviving Stark, and it's like, oh, I had a story once, you know, like it would be very
gather around, children.
Exactly, like that would be the logical prequel. But again, like until we know who really makes it through the next 2 seasons, like it'd be cool to see Sansa have a prequel or Arya, but like, oh God, what if they don't make it?
Don't put that out into the world.
They're gonna be fine.
Yeah, they're
Game
fine.
of Thrones doesn't kill anybody.
Absolutely no. Yeah. They are fine.
And then of course, the one that I think most interested to everybody would definitely be Hot Pie.
Yeah. Oh God.
Right?
Yeah. Obviously.
Super important.
I mean, you go full Great British Baking Show.
Yes, exactly. Great British Baking Show.
Yeah. Him and Mary Berry just making desserts and
just
having a time.
Things, wolf-shaped bread.
Yeah. In a way, you know, like maybe they catered the Red Wedding.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's a whole spin-off right there. Who catered the Red Wedding?
Love it. I think we covered a lot of good ground. Mary, thanks for hanging out and talking about this.
Of course, happy to.
Internet, we want to know. Do you guys need more Game of Thrones in your lives? That's a rhetorical question. Of course you do. What Game of Thrones spin-offs, prequels, sequels, tangential, parallel story things that do this do you want to see out of an HBO spinoff of Game of Thrones? Let us know in the comments. Remember Dalton's #1 rule: be nice. Click around here for more internets. Like, subscribe, tweet. We'll see you guys later. Make good choices.